Welcome. We are going to talk about the characteristics of life, which is in Chapter 1, Section 1 of your book. The objective for this screencast is that you understand the 7 characteristics of living things. And there are 7 that biologists agree on. However, you may find that different textbooks and different teachers may break them down in different ways. I've seen up to 9, but generally speaking, these are, at the heart of it all, these are the characteristics that scientists agree all living things have. Take a moment and pause the video and read through those. We're going to go over each one in more detail. So number 1, organization in cells. By organization, I don't mean that your binder's a mess, necessarily, but I'm talking about that there's a high degree of order. It can be in the organism's internal parts, such as their cells, or their interactions with the living world, like how they go about getting food and building shelter. So, cells are part of this first one. All living things are made of cells, and within those cells there is organization. So, thinking just about cells, there are 2 main types of organisms, or we can group them into 2 groups. Single-celled organisms, like bacteria, protists, amoebas, euglenas, there's all kinds. And then there's the multicellular organisms that are made up of more than one cell, such as plants and animals. Should be pretty self-explanatory. So this idea that all living things have some degree of internal organization. And we're talking about more than just on a cellular level, especially in those multicellular organisms. So starting at the broadest level, we have organ systems, things like your heart and lungs, and circulatory system, digestive system. Making up those organ systems, you have the individual organs. Making up the individual organs, you have tissues. And making up the individual tissues, you have cells. All living things respond to stimuli. What we mean by a stimulus, which is singular, or stimuli, which is plural, is any physical or chemical change in the internal or external environment. So a stimulus could be the caffeine that you had in your morning coffee. That's a chemical change in the internal environment of your body, and your body responds to it. We can also talk about external stimulus, such as the weather. Living things must respond internally and externally in order to survive. If you look at my picture there of the tree, the reason why a tree drops its leaves in the winter doesn't necessarily have to do with the temperature, although if you're in colder climates it may. But even in the south, deciduous trees will lose their leaves in the wintertime. This is because, generally speaking, wintertime is a time of drought and less water. So there's not as much water to support the leaves, and leaves also lose water. So they go dormant during the winter. Homeostasis. All living things maintain homeostasis, and that's the proper way to say it. They don't do homeostasis, they maintain homeostasis. So homeostasis is a stable level of internal conditions. If you can remember these 5 words right here, you'll be doing great. Homeostasis is stable level of internal conditions. So we just said that living things have to respond to their environment. Their temperatures are constantly changing. You're constantly eating things that change the internal environment in your cells. So your body, right down to the cellular level, has to maintain some status quo. It has to balance all of these stimuli. Some examples that are easy to imagine, especially with animals, are body temperature. Warm-blooded animals, we maintain a stable body temperature. We maintain stable levels of chemicals and substances, such as salt, and we maintain certain sugar levels in our bloodstream. We maintain certain levels of hormones. Even though, being a teenager, you may feel like your hormones are going crazy, your body does make an effort to regulate those. Insulin is a hormone that regulates the amount of sugar that's found in our blood. So there are lots of things that go on kind of behind the scenes that keep us running on an even keel. And that's what we talk about when we mean homeostasis, or when we say homeostasis. All living things have a metabolism. Now, you may have heard this word with dieting, like you want to speed up your metabolism or you want to slow down your metabolism. But really, what metabolism actually means, it's just the sum of all the chemical reactions that take place in your body. And what these chemical reactions do is transform energy and materials from the environment into some sort of usable product or energy. So a plant has a metabolism as well. We eat to get our energy, but a plant takes in sunlight. So this idea of photosynthesis is a great example of metabolism in plants. Growth and development. All living things grow and develop. So what's the difference between growth and development? Growth is simply to increase in size. And technically, even non-living things can grow. A mountain can grow as the plates shift and push up from underneath. It can get taller, and we may say that it's growing. But that's not quite what we mean. We do mean to increase in size. So all living things increase in size, including individual cells. The key here is development. And development is the process by which they become mature. And now I know some of you will probably never be socially mature, but that's okay. We're not talking about socially mature or mentally mature even. We're talking about physically mature. And that means you can reproduce. So all living things grow, develop, and then have the have the ability as a species to reproduce. It's true that within a species, such as humans, sometimes there are individuals within the species that can't reproduce. Some couples just can't have children. But on the whole, as a species, we are able to reproduce when we reach maturity. So if you look at my diagram over here, we start with a seed. It starts to grow, and it's developing as it's growing until it becomes a mature tree that can actually produce fruit and reproduce more seeds. For an oak tree, this takes about 30 years. Who knew, right? An oak tree takes anywhere from 30 to 50 years to become mature, so it won't make baby oak trees until it's anywhere between 30 to 50 years old. And that's what we mean by mature. And that leads us into reproduction. All living things reproduce. And there are two types of reproduction. Sexual reproduction, where you have a sperm and an egg and they produce an offspring with a unique set of genetic information. Or you have asexual reproduction, where there are no sperm and eggs involved and the offspring is identical to the parent. Think of a bacteria that simply grows to a point, to a certain size, and then it divides. And you have two bacteria, but they're genetically the same. Many plants can do and will do both sexual and asexual reproduction. And the final characteristic of all living things is that as the organisms do all of these other things, as they reproduce, as they respond to their environments, their genetic information changes over time to create organisms that are better suited for the conditions and better suited to make more offspring. We call the force behind these changes evolution. And Evolution, these small changes in genetic information can lead to new types of organisms from pre-existing organisms given enough time. We have a whole section in our book on evolution, and I encourage your questions and comments about it, and we'll tackle this topic in the spring. And those are the 7 characteristics of life. If you'd like to scroll back and get an overview, please do. Thank you.